Make a start. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here. As I was saying, please feel free to switch on your camera. It's great to see faces, especially on a Friday afternoon. I'm trying to look and feel brighter, looking forward to the weekend, of course. My name is Swati, for those of you that don't know me, which might be a lot of people here, and I'm the head of talent performance and innovation at Westminster City Council. I'm also part of the PPMA network and also part of the board, and we are joined by Matt Ingram-Smith from Tribepad today. So Matt is a senior sales manager at Tribepad, and he's going to be doing a great session around public sector recruitment for us. Before I talk a little bit about the actual session, just want to remind you, it'll be great if you can stay on mute. Please do feel free to switch on your cameras. We will have some time for questions towards the end, but if you have any imminent questions, please do feel free to put them on the chat, and we'll try and pick them as we can. And I think that's pretty much it. I think some of you may already have done one of these before, so you already kind of know the drill, but we're looking forward to a great session. So today, as you know, we're going to be focusing on public sector recruitment. Matt is going to be focusing on 6 key focus areas, which will touch on modernizing the approach for to be as effective as a private sector. And this will include, key challenges, understanding requirements, managing stakeholders, making the case for change, which is obviously quite challenging sometimes, procurement routes, and the lessons that have been learned along the way. He'll also be digging into Tribepad's own data around public sector resourcing, the current feeling amongst recruiters in the industry, and what needs to be done first to turn things around. So I think it'll be a really interesting and interactive session. And recruitment has been quite interesting, with the conversations about the Great Resignation and also the quiet quitting. So I think it's all quite relevant in the industry right now. So definitely looking forward to that, Matt. And on that note, I'll hand over to you, Matt, and take a back seat.
Great, thanks for that, Swati. And hearing all of that, it sounds like we've got a lot to get through, doesn't it? So I'll get straight on and share my screen. By the way, one thing that I should just say right from the beginning is I'm sort of approaching this with a focus on resourcing and recruiting, and I will call you all recruiters, even though I know we have a good mix of HRDs and people on this call. The reason I'm going to call you all recruiters or resources at various points is because in our roles, we are all recruiters. Whether or not you like that fact, you have an important role to play in attracting people to the authorities that you work for and to the organizations that you represent. So for the purposes of today, even if that's not your job title, I'm going to invite you to consider yourself a recruiter, if that's okay. Yes, as Swati said, I'm one of the leads for public sector here in Tribepad, as well as actually being married to a practice supervisor within child protection within our local authority. So I see firsthand some of the amazing work being done on the front line within the public sector, and I'm hugely proud of the work that my wife does, and by extension, the work that all of you do to keep our public services running and to really be the lifeblood of our society. But before I cry, our company mission as Tribepad is to be the power behind recruitment done right. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable just for a moment, right at the beginning of this session. I'm going to ask you to, if it's okay, share a word or an emoji in the chat just to describe how you're feeling right now in terms of recruitment and your role within the authority or the organization you represent. What word or emoji best sums up how you feel in your role? I'll give you a couple of seconds or so to do that. And just whilst you're doing so, I'm just going to talk you through what we're looking at. And Swati's already covered these here. We commissioned some research into the state of the recruitment sector, which broadly covers the public sector and the private sector as well. And I'm going to share some of those findings with you and look at what we can take from Tribepad's private sector clients and how in some cases the public sector is leading the way, which is a really exciting place for you to be as innovators. But at the end of the day, it's about helping recruiters deliver fairer, faster, and better recruitment outcomes. So I can see some great emojis in the chat. And if I'm interpreting these right, I can see an exploded brain appearing a couple of times, and a few people who perhaps might be a bit inquisitive or unsure, some maybe downbeat or downcast faces, but there's a good mix in there. There's some people that are feeling good as well. Well, you'd be pleased to know that you're not on your own there, but we'll come back to why that is in just a moment. And also, I'm having a slight problem with PowerPoint, so sometimes I might have to flick onto a slide and back for it to actually show anything. But about Tribepad, for those of you that don't know us, one slide, I promise. If you wanted to apply for a job at over 100 of the UK's best known organisations, you use Tribepad. And for the first 9 years or so of our lives, we concentrated on growing in the private sector. So that means that if I just take the last 12 months as an example, if you wanted to apply for a job as the Director General of the BBC, or as an engineer working on the European Space Programme, or as a vicar in the Church of England, or the person that makes the videos announcing the latest signing for Liverpool Football Club, you use Tribepad to apply for those jobs, which I think is pretty cool. We work with some really interesting organisations, and our platform helps them to advertise a job, screen candidates, conduct video interviews, offer contracts, onboarding, and welcome, all of the sort of stuff that you'd expect from a recruitment system. And then over the last 4 years, we've been growing our customer base in the public sector, some of whom I know are represented on this call and on the screen in front of you. I just want to share some of those findings throughout this call, really. We've seen something like 250,000 applications for local government roles alone in the last year. And just this month, we've gone live with West Northants Council and a couple of others coming on stream shortly. So it's a really exciting place to be in the local authority. Well, the reason I asked you for how you feel right now is because this is the very question that we asked the recruiters, and we surveyed about 528 different recruiters. And we asked this: what's the main cause of, or what is your stress level? And then we asked them why. The findings show that 72% of recruiters are experiencing stress of some level, which is probably what you'd expect to hear. But the slightly worrying statistic is that over a third of recruiters are struggling to cope or at breaking point. That's a slightly scary place to be, isn't it? It could be the person you're sat next to at work. It could be you. There are various causes for this. Why are we seeing that? Biggest causes are not enough staff in my team, a lack of talent who are applying for roles, so that's the marketplace, the pressure that we face to recruit the right people internally, or those tight recruitment deadlines. It's a hard job. Recruitment is a hard job, and we're under lots of pressure from leadership and the various stakeholders who are in our organizations. And the interesting thing for me here is that 3/4 of these, so 3 out of these 4 factors, are internal. Not having enough staff in my team, pressure to recruit the right people, tight recruitment deadlines. This is a bit indicative that perhaps the senior leadership or the committees that we respond to maybe don't quite appreciate the work that TA or talent acquisition does, recruitment and resourcing does. Maybe they don't understand the challenges that we face. So how can we better show the value of what we do to get the investment that means we can have better working relationships and ultimately relieve this pressure? Well, my 6 key points, and there are 6 of these, so I'm going to have to speed through them. I'm not expecting you to remember each and every word that I'm saying, but I think it would just be good to start the conversation here. Recruiters, we're well known for feeling like we have to do everything. Jack of all trades, master of none is sometimes an accusation thrown at recruiters, but we might have KPIs and SLAs and other 3-letter acronyms set by our committees and the boards that we respond to. But what about the objectives that we set ourselves? So we think that taking time to reset and work out what we want to do can be the first step in delivering exceptional results. I've got a video which I hope is going to work. And this is Gillian from the Milton Keynes resourcing team, where she's talking about procuring a new platform. But the same principle applies whether it's project-based work or just your BAU hiring. And those of you that were on the session that we ran with Gillian a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, might recognize some of the content that she's delivering here. But let's just watch what Gillian has to say.
And all I would say to somebody going through this process is be very, very clear with what you want, because it's very easy to be sold a system that looks amazing, but is potentially offering a solution to a different problem to the one that you have. We saw some amazing things from mass market hires, which actually Tribepad could deliver anyway, but that were really designed in that marketplace about onboarding people. And that's never really going to be where local government is, because because of how we operate for a startup, but it just wouldn't have been for us. But so I would say be careful that you don't buy something that is maybe not going to deliver what you need. So be very clear with what your expectations are and with what your actual needs are. Anybody who's ever done any systems thinking, you know, when you actually begin to think about what are we actually trying to achieve here? And what we were trying to achieve here was really three things. It was we needed a management experience that was excellent, and we needed a candidate experience that was second to none. They were the two things that we really wanted to crack. And then the third one, really, and this was very much a product of where we were, was that we wanted some control. We wanted a system that actually was responsive enough to respond to recruitment needs at the speed that you need to. You know, any of you who are working in the recruitment space, you know how things change at the drop of a hat. You need to design a new campaign. You want a completely new application structure, whatever those things are. You know, say for recruitment requirements have changed, so you've got to get some different checks and balances in place. All of those things are happening all the time. And when you have a system like we've very much experienced with our HR system, where the lead time can be 6 months to get anything changed, it just wasn't responsive enough. So we were absolutely adamant, that's it, all of this is going, and we're going to procure a new system.
There we go. Right, I'm just going to move us on.
And all I would say to somebody going through this process is be.
There we go. I told you I was having some problems with PowerPoint, didn't I? So we heard there from Gilly talking about setting the objectives and how you can then deliver against those. And in the public sector, as you all know, is so often a truism that bureaucracy and compliance requirements mean that the actual experience of your candidates or your applicants or those who are actually utilizing any technology you have is secondary. But with the lens of having the right objectives, it's possible to achieve both, as that feedback that Gilly's team received when they delivered the Tribepad platform shows on screen. So good objective setting should be the starting point for any transformation, whether it's a formal program or your own improvements. You will know as a recruiter, and remember, I'm calling you all recruiters today, you will know whether that's for you, for your team, for your organization, but ultimately it has to start with you. If those objectives are coming from elsewhere, from other stakeholders, it's possible that you might not quite have the delivery to go with those. So that's number one, objective setting. Number two, EVP and Candidate X. What do I mean by Candidate X? That's not a mystery candidate, that is candidate experience. So from that research, we saw that the lack of available talent is even more keenly felt in public sector circles. And so often we're fighting big battles when it comes to salaries, benefits, and often flexibility of work when it compares with the private sector. Although we have actually seen research that indicates that public sector employment is increasing while private sector employment is decreasing, which I think is quite an interesting place for us to be. Still, it's more important than ever to think about how your employer value proposition and your candidate experience can help you to fill those roles. So when we think about lack of talent, that's really about how we attract, how we proactively search. This is what you're seeing on screen is an example from one of our clients. This is Signature Healthcare. With their old system, they saw something in the region of around 900 applications a week for their roles in care. Now, through tinkering with a few things, and that's like better Google visibility. So how are your jobs indexed by search engines so that candidates who are searching for them actually get them in the right line? How do you structure your jobs so that it is properly structured for the market that you're trying to reach? How do you make an attractive and simple application process so that your candidates are actually engaged and want to reach the end of it? Within the first week of putting in Tribepad, they saw that number jump from 900 applications to 16,000 applications, which I know presents a different problem, a problem of volume, but what it meant for them is that they're opening that funnel right up and giving themselves a better pool from which to select from. As a side note, our public sector clients saw roles that didn't require a CV, needing fewer applicants overall to fill successfully. So that indicates that having a structured application form, and by that I don't mean a 10-page long form that candidates lose interest as they go through, can lead to a smaller number of higher quality applicants. So thought and design of the candidate experience and how you surface your employer value proposition can really lead to significant results and changes. Number three, Talent pooling. So recruitment is so often reactive, with our research showing that around 50% of recruiters are dissatisfied with their career because they see themselves, or they are seen by their stakeholders, as order takers. And so one of the ways where you can become more proactive is talent pooling, which is where the real value add comes in for resourcing, and going from being someone that takes a brief from a hiring manager and goes and takes that order and fills it, to being someone that is on the front foot and actually adding value to the recruitment process. Talent pooling, just for those of you that know, is about building, engaging and nurturing curated pools of available, pre-screened, perhaps qualified candidates. And obviously you need the right tools to do that, but aside from those tools, it requires real soft skills, those of communication, planning, empathy, and of course, the time to deliver that. So here's some examples. Good talent pooling means designing for the future as well as for the present. What does your pipeline look like? Can you use your organization's overarching 5-year plan or your annual people strategy to define what routes to market you take? If you know that there are significant changes coming up within your organization, and that's defined by the people plan that gets handed down from on high, can you start to pipeline and start to think about those future roles, take care of the future, and then the present takes care for itself? So effective pipelining allows you to set your future selves up to win by taking advantage of a shorter time to hire, better quality of hire, increasing things like internal mobility, and even using your alumni network. Doing all of those things together, that's how we see the results that we've seen with things like Sodexo, who saw staff retention increase by 35% because of their internal mobility efforts, and they saw a 40% drop in agency costs, almost overnight. On the left, we're looking at Subway, who managed to increase candidate applications by over 40%. They increased their quality of hire and improved their time to hire all at the same time as well, by thinking strategically about this talent pool piece. How do we plan for the future and deliver for today? Number 4, working collaboratively. We saw that one of the top causes of recruiter stress was not having enough staff in your team. So you're required to do more with fewer resources, which really emphasizes the value or the vitality even of working collaboratively. And this, personally, is where I think public sector leads the way. But here's some examples of where our customers in the private sector are doing so. This should pop up here. So you may have seen some of this in the press at the beginning of lockdown back in 2020. I know I'm calling back to a bygone era. This is Tesco. Typically, they would see in a normal week something in the region of 20,000 applications a week for their roles. If I can take you back to week 3 of March 2020, when we were told we were going into lockdown, this for them shot up to 1 million applications within those first 7 days of that lockdown, which didn't actually overwhelm them because of the way they empower their store managers. So these are hiring managers who effectively become an extension of the resourcing and talent team. And they do that by recognizing that recruitment is a small but essential part of their day job. So those hiring managers, those store managers were equipped with vetted templates of job adverts, which they could go live with, obviously subject to an approval process. The tools that enable them to communicate effectively and quickly with candidates, to be able to arrange interviews within the platform, to be able to capture and issue feedback, make offers and contracts and all of those sorts of things. And they were able to hire 45,000 staff in a matter of weeks, which is half of a normal year's quota for Tesco, whilst delighting all of their candidates, well, most of their candidates, maybe not Jason Manford, who tried to do his bit by applying for a role to be a Tesco's customer assistant and didn't make the cut. But yeah, it's all about how you can mobilize your teams and your stakeholders around you to become an extension of the talent and resourcing team. I've got a question that sometimes I ask and sometimes I just tell. But the question is, who's responsible for contracts and onboarding for new hires? I won't ask it here, but maybe just think to yourselves, am I responsible for that within my team? Usually when I do ask that question, it's around about 20-25% of the room pop their hands up to say that they're responsible for that. And then the follow-up question is, who's responsible for backfilling any roles if a candidate drops out because of a bad or unsatisfactory onboarding experience? And then that 20-25% gets closer to 100%. It's that realization that whilst onboarding and retention by extension don't necessarily fall under the remit of recruitment in most organizations, there is a direct link. There's some causation and correlation going on. So research shows that the better and quicker the experience of onboarding, the higher the retention rates. Why am I showing Card Factory? Because they had an SLA, which meant that they had to get a candidate from the point of being offered to appearing on all of their EPOS systems, their tills and the front of house systems within 48 hours. So they decided to embrace the tech that was on offer within Tribepad, but also to ensure that their recruitment teams worked hand in hand with their HR admin and onboarding teams to onboard those candidates. So we're thinking about the point in the process where offers are made, contracts are signed, references are taken, having not just a handover, but a cooperation between those teams and then working hand in hand helps them meet that 48-hour SLA for the first time ever, which when you're dealing with 8,000 hires in the lead up to Christmas to deal with that seasonal influx of people walking into Card Factory to buy their Christmas cards is really significant. What that also meant, as well as meeting their SLA, is it gave them time to add value in the onboarding process. So Card Factory's strapline is helping to celebrate life's moments. There aren't many more exciting times to celebrate than getting a new job. So that collaboration and automation allowed then time for the value add, which meant that each new starter joining the team gets a card in the post signed from the new team and the hiring manager, because they're able to add that time and focus on the candidate because of the time they've saved working together as a team. It might not be the recruiter's responsibility necessarily, but managing your stakeholders, working collaboratively leads to better outcomes in the long run. Two to go then, ED&I, which is right at the top of everyone's agenda, and rightly so. Recruitment has a transformational impact on company culture. We know this, and business outcomes all across every single client that we work with. That's true. After all, diversity is a reality. Inclusion is a choice. So what we've seen trending in local government, but also in professional services, engineering and construction, is that many organizations are now using anonymizing applications in the early stages. It's a simple option configured on a job-by-job basis that just means that you hide personal information about candidates from the hiring managers, who are then making judgments and initial sifts on the experience and the objective scoring of applications that candidates have. And so then what we see is across 8 local government organizations, we did a little bit of research here, they saw an average 18% increase of candidates from diverse ethnic origins, which clearly, this isn't a solution for everything. This is for your hiring managers rather than for your recruiters, and it needs to be allied to good stakeholder engagement and education. But it's all about delivering those outcomes. So Coventry City Council are a great example here. As with all of your organizations, I'm sure, vital and crucial that they represent their community that they serve. And so by putting in place a few different things, being able to post to diverse job boards, being able to anonymize those applications, and full end-to-end reporting that meant they understood where their candidates were coming from and what was happening in the process, meant that they were able to increase their hires from candidates from a diverse ethnic origin from 18% to 39%. Why is that significant? Because Coventry as a city, the population is around about 40% individuals from diverse ethnic origins. So they were able to truly say, we represent the community in which we serve. Oh, and also at the same time, they saw a real increase in female managers at the most senior levels of government and candidates with disabilities as well. So we're on to the final stretch, the home stretch here. Reporting, which I know is... no one really gets out of bed for reporting, do they? Certainly not in most HR circles that I operate in. But looking at where tech can help ease the stress, which is based on that research that we touched on earlier enough, we know that there's not enough candidates, there's not enough resource, there's not enough time. So how can we use tech to tell the stories really, and I guess increase our stakeholder buy-in internally within our organizations? Well, we know that recruitment leaders, business leaders, HR leaders, leaders in all walks of life within our organizations want to see data. They want to understand the problems that we face and then try and unlock value. After all, you can't manage what you can't measure, as one of my colleagues likes to say. So you need to understand things like your source. Where are your candidates coming from? Where do they live? If you know where your candidates are, you can go looking for them. What about volume, pipeline? What sort of roles do we have coming up? How do we understand our recruitment costs, whether that's saving or spend? How do we know who our best performing recruiters are so we can learn from them and bring all of our team up to measure? How do we understand who those problem hiring managers are and how do we manage them? You know, they're the ones who, when their name pops up on Teams in the little right-hand corner, we're sort of inwardly groan because we know that a problem is coming our way. How do we understand what blockages are in the process? And we've already talked about diversity, but this is about understanding the data, telling meaningful stories back to our organization so that we can share knowledge and go from things like mandatory reporting to actually demonstrating your value. So it's not a case of, oh, I now need to share some data because I'm being asked, you know, how many hires did you make this year? But it goes to a question that could be more along the lines of, if we had, you know, this money or resource or time or staffing levels, we could use talent pools, for instance, to increase our internal mobility by 10%, or we could reduce our agency spend by X, Y, Z. Which could in turn lead to seats being filled quicker, lower agency spend, I'm looking at you, social care, and reducing recruitment advertising budgets. So using data to tell those stories, which leads me on to my key takeaways here. We're in the final stretch. So you can see these on screen. Everyone in TA and recruitment is maxed out getting stressed. It's not likely to improve anytime soon. So prioritize your own well-being. You can't support others if your own well is run dry. Review your objectives, what you're aiming to achieve, what resource and tech you need to get there. Number 3, data literate recruiters build better senior relationships. I know it just trips off the tongue. It's such a nice catchphrase, but having a good visibility of your workload, improving your processes and sharing your data is the key to demonstrating value to senior stakeholders. And that's how we get more resource to help relieve the stress. And then experiment, share your successes and failure, go again, come to webinars and events like this. And learn from your peers and share with your peers as well. You work incredibly hard. Be proud of the work you do. You know, just take a moment to stop and take stock and celebrate the things that you do so well. And that's me. Thank you. Hope you found that interesting. I've got a couple of QR codes on screen, which you can scan to get on the left-hand side, the State of the Recruitment Sector Research, which expands on the information I shared today. We also have a white paper, which is on modernising recruitment in the public sector, which draws on some of the themes I've shared on today. I know we're running the clock down, but I wanted to see if there were any questions at all.
Thanks, Matt. We literally have 1 minute. So there's a question from Colin here, which I'll try and read out. So he says, at Kent, we access Tribepad through a third party. Colin, I don't know if you wanted to, it'd probably be better coming from you. Do you want to come in and I can see you online?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. We know that some organisations, or maybe indeed most, have a recruitment team, and the recruitment team is responsible for sourcing candidates for managers. We have a devolved approach where managers take the responsibility themselves to access Tribepad, and the recruitment campaign is something which they take more ownership for. And I'm just wondering what sort of proportions of organisations do it our way relative to a bigger recruitment team being involved, and what are the pros and cons of doing it our way, and should we be looking at doing it differently?
Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. That's a great question, and one we could probably spend half an hour on itself. But in short, without any stats to back this up, I'm going to make up a number, but I think it's more or less right. I would guess that 25%, maybe 30% of the organisations we work with across public and private operate in a similar manner. So devolving that access and devolving the responsibility to the hiring managers directly. I shared the example of Tesco. They're one of the leaders in this, and they empower their store managers to actually effectively act as an on-site recruitment and hiring manager. There are obviously pros and cons to both approaches. I think one of the significant pros to the approach that you take in Kent and with Kantian Business Solutions is when you have an organization that is acting on your behalf, but sort of at an arm's length, you have the same sort of challenges, but also benefits that I guess the quangos that we see talked about at government level have, in that you're able to operate under your own auspices. You're able to utilize the brand, because Kent County Council have a fantastic brand. You're one of the biggest employers in the area. You're able to utilize the brand, but also take a step back and sell the benefits even more. So if I tell you that Tribepad is great, you'll probably go, okay, I'm sure it is, but I'm sure you would have to say that. If one of my friends who works at another organization that is doing some work alongside us as consultant comes to you and says, well, Tribepad is great actually, because we have a much broader reach. We don't have Tribepad above the door, but we work with these sorts of organizations and see this, these trends and these themes occurring. You're much more likely to take that on board. And I think you have the same approach with Cantium, that because Cantium represents more than just Kent County Council, you have a more significant buying power when it comes to getting your candidates on board. So that's the whole attraction and sourcing piece. But you also have the ability to tell stories that don't just relate to the local authority. Obviously, the con of that is if there is any sort of lag between the parent organization, KCC, and Cantium in terms of decision making or authority, then your candidates may lose out there. You will know that far better than I do, but you're not alone. And as I say, I would estimate between a quarter and a third of our customers have a similar sort of setup there.
Thanks, Matt. Just conscious of time. Just wondering if there are any other questions before we bring this to a close. You can raise your hands or come online, or just post in the chat. Nope. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So on that note, we'll bring the session to a close. Thank you so much, Matt. That was really insightful, and hopefully a lot of our audience have found that helpful. So hope you have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much for being here, and hope to see you, some of you again at future events. So thank you and have a lovely afternoon.